truth wins out when interest rates come down, following inflation. I think what we saw in the aftermath of COVID will be repeated but not just for a one-year period, for the next 5 to 10 years. So let me go through quickly the timeline for innovation, just to set this up. We are in a period now like none other in history. This is the timeline of innovation, a graph that our chief futurist, Brett Winton, put together after consulting academics and academic research. These have been the true disruptive innovations throughout history. And you'll notice there's only one other time before today that we have seen multiple innovation platforms evolve at the same time. It was the early 1900s. Telephone, electricity, and the automobile. Transformational, transformed the world. And believe it or not, we are in a period today a little bit like we were then. There was a pandemic back then. It was the Spanish flu. There was a war back then. It was World War I. Now, those problems were much worse than our problems today. But what happened? Innovation took off, and we ended up inflation peaking at 24% in June of 1920 and dropping within 1 year to minus 15% in June of 21. And having been through a very tough period, we ended up in what was called back then the Roaring '20s. It was a great time for the stock market. It was a great time for investments of all kinds because inflation and interest rates were coming down. Today, we have 5 innovation platforms evolving at the same time. Again, never happened in history. And the seeds for all of them were planted during the 20 years that ended in the tech and telecom bubble. Now, the tech and telecom bubble is the first time a lot of investors heard this concept, exponential growth. And they bought into the dream. But the problem was, back then, the technologies weren't ready. And if they were anywhere near ready, the costs were way too high. We didn't get the cloud until 2006 with AWS. We didn't get the big breakthroughs in artificial intelligence with deep learning until 2012. In the case of DNA sequencing, back in 2003, when the first whole human genome was sequenced, one person's genome, it had taken $2.7 billion and 13 years of computing power to sequence that one genome. Even if costs had collapsed the next day, the next year, by 75%, it would still have been too expensive. We've gone from $2.7 billion for one person's genome back then to $500 today, and a few hours of computing power. And there are 2 companies, Illumina and Ultima, who are saying next year that will be $100 or $200. So we believe we are ready for prime time now. The technologies are ready, and the costs are low enough. That's critical. So what are these 5 platforms? DNA sequencing. We call it actually now multi-omics sequencing because it's not just DNA, it's RNA, it's proteins, it's methylation. It's very complicated, but it's really exciting. We're going to be curing disease thanks to these breakthroughs. And in fact, we've already had one, and I'll get a very important breakthrough just within the last week, and I'll get to that when we get to the genomic slide. Robotics, industrial robot costs are dropping precipitously. We have a labor shortage. Innovation solves problems. The demand for robots is skyrocketing right now. Energy storage, I talked about that with the crisis in Ukraine. Consumer preference shifting to innovation in response not only to that tragedy and oil prices going up, but also because these are just better cars. They're more environmentally friendly, much more environmentally friendly. Artificial intelligence, the breakthroughs in AI today I have to tell you, are mind-blowing even to us. Now, we are trying to look as far into the future as we can, and we are seeing breakthroughs that we expected in 5 or 10 years happening within 6 months and 1 year now. I don't know if any of you have heard about GPT, but GPT, which was just released, it's a flavor of GPT-3. Basically, you can say to it, prompt it and say, write me an essay on disruptive innovation as Cathie Wood would describe it. We did this exercise at a brainstorm. In less than 3 seconds, we had that. And it was pretty good because it was scraping the internet, and we have a lot. We share all of our research. So ChatGPT-3 had a lot to go on. So that AI, we think the transformation is going to be far more than even we, focused only on disruptive innovation, thought even 1 year ago. And then finally, blockchain technology. In 2020, we did a study on how productive these 5 innovation platforms were going to be. And what I can tell, and you can see the growth rates that we were coming up with. Back then, truly disruptive innovation in the public equity markets were priced at roughly $14 trillion, less than 10% of the total global public equity market. 14 trillion. In the last year, that has gone to 7 trillion. Now, what has changed on the lower end of this, 2030? Nothing. In fact, if anything, those circles are bigger today than we thought. And one of the biggest reasons is artificial intelligence. So you can see the growth rates that we expect. These are compound annual growth rates in the middle there. They have gone up, not the first one. That first one is not anything apart from innovation. We think it will be very slow growing, and we think there will be that there will be a lot of disruption and disintermediation in the traditional world order. So that 3% might be too optimistic. However, those other growth rates, our confidence has increased because the top circles have shrunk because the markets have come down. The bottom circles have actually expanded. So the opportunities are greater, the growth rates are greater. One of the reasons we think that those growth rates are greater is because of the convergence between and among technologies. So just to give you a couple of examples, we have, and these are S-curves feeding S-curves feeding S-curves. So exponential growth compounded. Autonomous taxi platforms. We're seeing proof of concept, cruise automation, which is GM's autonomous offering in San Francisco. I just took a ride in one of their cars, and it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Autonomous taxi platforms are the convergence of 3 of our major platforms. Robots, autonomous vehicles are robots. Energy storage, they will be electric. Electric vehicles, total cost of ownership today is lower than gas-powered vehicles. And artificial intelligence, they're going to be powered by AI. So again, one S-curve feeding another S-curve feeding another S-curve, we think causing explosive opportunities. Another example in the healthcare space, we have multi-omic sequencing is one of the technologies, and artificial intelligence. Those two coming together, along with a technology that was made possible by DNA sequencing, CRISPR-Cas9, or gene editing generally, those 3 platforms not only are going to cause explosive growth opportunities, but they are going to cure disease.